This is the first time that we've had sustained air strikes from one nuclear armed state on another without any kind of it never happened before, and then no escalation to a nuclear level.
It's not that Pakistan did not try to hit back from their the J-10Cs, the JF-17s, the PL-15s, air-to-air long-range missiles. They used a high-speed rocket, as the government put it, to target one of our crucial bases in India. They may have failed.
These organizations are now going to be spending a lot more time on their own operational security. And when they break into smaller cells, and when they have additional cutouts and communication channels such that they're not so easy to track and detect, when they have to spend their time moving from safe house to safe house, that's time they're not spending.
Why is the world not cracking down on this radicalization and Pakistan's state support?
In the UK, that I would say second or third generation Muslim immigrants, in some cases, British citizens, have become radicalized. I think what the power of the internet and the power of certain types of kind of hate preachers, the US wanted Pakistan to help provide security in the Gulf against a possible Russian invasion. And that is why the partnerships with Turkey, the partnerships with Iran, the partnerships with Pakistan, you can see that whole line there. And in some respects, I think the Trump administration has returned to that kind of model.
India's Operation Sindoor, where the Indian Armed Forces initially targeted 9 terror training camps, including the headquarters of terror Lashkar-e-Taiba at Muridke and Jaish-e-Mohammad at Bahawalpur, then punched holes through Pakistan's air defense system. 6 radars were destroyed, and then once Pakistan targeted military installations in India, India hit back, targeting 11 air bases in Pakistan, including the command and control crucial Noor Khan Air Base, Sargodha, the deepest strike, and of course the S-400 air defense system in an offensive role, taking down an advanced early warning airborne system 320 kilometers deep inside Pakistan. To talk more about Operation Sindoor, its outcomes, and the apprehension that could conflict escalate with Operation Sindoor still on, with me on the Chakravyuh podcast is Professor Walter Ladwig, the third Associate Professor at King's College London. Professor, welcome on the Chakravyuh podcast.
Thanks so much, Gaurav. Happy to be here.
You've been studying Operation Sindoor, and this is the first time that one nuclear weapon state targeted another nuclear weapon state, which was helped by a third nuclear weapon state. What's your reading of Operation Sindoor?
Well, this is really groundbreaking in our understanding of conflict in the nuclear era and conflict between nuclear armed states. Because as you said, this is the first time that we've had sustained air strikes from one nuclear armed state on another without any kind of it never happened before, and then no escalation to a nuclear level. And then, as you said, there is this additional factor of China as a principal military patron of Pakistan. So much of the world is going to be learning and studying this, I think, going forward for decades. We're really charting new history in our understanding of how nuclear weapons affect conflict at the conventional level.
Has it ever happened before anywhere? And you've studied so many conflicts. There are so many conflicts that are currently underway. Even United States and Soviet Union, you've never had nuclear weapon states launching missiles or aircraft at each other.
Never. So there were proxy conflicts of sorts between the US and the Soviet Union. So reports say of Soviet pilots flying MiGs in the Korean War on behalf of the North Koreans. Allegations of the same perhaps in Vietnam. But the only direct conflicts we know of, the Soviets and the Chinese fought over a disputed river border in the 1960s, but those were really kind of hand-to-hand combat with clubs and bats, not weapons. Of course, we have Kargil, which was very tightly bound, and the Indian Air Force at the time was very clear in its instructions not to cross the LOC and was very constrained in making sure that that didn't get breached. We have Galwan, again, hand-to-hand combat, lives lost, 2 nuclear armed states. Never, ever airstrikes, missiles, and sustained multi-day operations. This is the first time this has ever happened.
Yeah, 88 hours, that conflict, and it's not that Pakistan did not try to hit back from their the J-10Cs, the JF-17s, the PL-15s, air-to-air long-range missiles. They used a high-speed rocket, as the government put it, to target one of our crucial bases in India. They may have failed, and that rocket fell in Sirsa. But what is your understanding of India's response to Pakistan's actions?
Well, I think it really demonstrated, the prime minister called it a new normal. It certainly demonstrated a new level, right? We can see a historical trajectory going back to 2016. So we had the surgical strike after Uri, which really surfaced things that had been going on before. This was not the first time there was a cross-border raid, but the first time that the government made it so public. Then we had Balakot. So that was a big deal because this was, in the nuclear era, the first time an operation had been carried out into Pakistan proper, right? There was an assumption among many analysts and observers that Kashmir was seen as somehow different, but crossing over into the, unambiguous sovereign territory of either India or Pakistan would be a real escalation. And that proved not necessarily to be the case. But here now you have deep strikes into Pakistani Punjab on night one, and then repeated attacks on multiple air facilities, suppression of radar, all happening, again, without necessarily escalation to anything approaching the nuclear level, but really showing that India possessed not only the ability, which was really quite significant because you had Chinese-made air defense systems of a rather modern quality that were, suppressed and defeated, but also the political will to carry this out.
The point that you raised about India striking terror in the heart of Pakistan's Punjab province. Murid ke is practically Lahore or Bahawalpur, southern Punjab. What did that indicate to you?
To me, it indicated that no area is off limits. Again, I think there was a latent assumption among some observers and perhaps some actors in Pakistan themselves that it would be too escalatory, it would be too politically sensitive to really reach out and carry out operations in this manner, coming particularly from outside the country. Again, we know there are allegations on the Pakistani side about maybe there are people on the ground doing certain things or facilitating the elimination of certain actors. But this is a real clear, unambiguous launch of ordnance from one side to the other to target something. Again, many observers felt this was probably something that would be too politically fraught, and therefore there was a degree of protection or sanctuary here. And I think this now shows that there is not a sanctuary.
So has that message, in your view, gone across to Pakistan, to the terrorists in Pakistan, the army in Pakistan, and to the world at large, that no part of Pakistan is safe for terrorists or terror supporters? Because I have covered counter-terror operations for a very long time. When 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks happened, we were in Mumbai city covering 26/11, and there was no response. And we've covered terror even before that. When our parliament was targeted, for 10 months the armies were at the borders. There was no action. In midst of all of that, you had Pakistani terrorists who attacked one of our very crucial military stations at Kaluchak, massacred army families, including little children. And that was almost as if Pakistan was saying, we're a nuclear weapon state, we'll come into your army garrison, we'll kill your army families and not just soldiers, and you can't do anything. And India did nothing. So both under late Prime Minister Vajpayee and late Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, two massive provocations and no response. And after Pahalgam, no part of Pakistan, from Skardu in Pakistan occupied Jammu Kashmir, that airfield, to Noor Khan, to Bulari in Sindh, to Malir Cant in Karachi, if they were targeted, and across Pakistan's Punjab, Sargodha, Jacobabad, Rahim Yar Khan, Noor Khan, what's the message to Asim Munir and his men?
I think the message is that India can reach out and strike. I think the challenge is that this is a game of constant adaptation. So if they had any illusions, if they had any sense or were somehow a little more relaxed, a little took things for granted because they thought they won't go this far, they now know. So there will be adaptation. There will be further efforts, particularly by these various groups, to disperse and conceal their areas of operation. They will make it harder to be found. And it's we often liken this in the U.S. to a kid's game of whack-a-mole, where, you know, you constantly have the thing popping up, and every time you whack it down in one hole, it pops out of another. And this is the challenge. And countries around the world have faced this with respect to when you have the ability to track, you have the ability to strike. It doesn't mean you know where everyone is at all time. And they will get smarter at evading and so forth. The good news lesson is, even if it's harder for you to target them, these organizations are now going to be spending a lot more time on their own operational security. And when they break into smaller cells, and when they have additional cutouts and communication channels such that they're not so easy to track and detect, when they have to spend their time moving from safe house to safe house, that's time they're not spending conducting operations. So even if it's harder to necessarily replicate next time around, if it happens, and it probably will happen, Operation Sindoor, the fact that these folks now have to have a higher level of security, have to keep on the move, have to think about these things, imposes real costs on them that limits their effectiveness.
So far, was that the impression that Pakistan has nuclear weapons and Pakistan has the immunity to do anything? There will not be any massive response. You know, maybe an artillery, a punitive strike at the LOC, or something a little more, and nothing beyond. If now that government of India has said, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said, India will not make any distinction between state and non-state actors. Did you also get that impression when you saw co-commanders and Pakistani generals at the funeral of terrorists? And a terrorist recently, his video surfaced, went viral world over, where he was saying that the Pakistan Army chief ordered the corps commanders to come for funerals of terrorists of, they don't call themselves terrorists, of Jaish-e-Mohammad and Lashkar-e-Taiba. That distinction between state and non-state is gone in Pakistan.
I was really surprised, particularly when those videos surfaced, because for a long time, I think the Pakistani military played the plausible deniability game and, you know, sort of successfully, within reasonable doubt, obscured exactly what the connections were and how tight the linkage were, so that even observers from the outside would wonder, you know, are these people from the military side sort of freelancing in their spare time? Are they, you know, retired people who are close to the government but acting with deniability? To have serving uniformed officers in that capacity, you know, really eliminates any kind of doubt in my mind about the level of linkages and connections. I mean, I was really shocked because quite often they're really good at the propaganda messaging and keeping things, you know, confusing and distorted. And here I don't know what they were thinking, because they kind of completely showed their hand, in my opinion.
So I was doing a course in the United Kingdom in 2005 when the London bombings took place, the 7/7 London bombings. And they were traced back to Pakistani origin, British passport holders, but who had come back to Pakistan for training and radicalization. So they got radicalized in Pakistan and carried out 7/7. There have been instances across the world where second generation radicalized Pakistani Muslims have carried out terror attacks, including an attempt by an Air Vice Marshal's son in New York, tried to blow up the World Trade Center, that Times Square area. Why is the world not cracking down on this radicalization and Pakistan's state support to that radicalization, even though the world is suffering?
So I know it's a broader phenomenon in the UK that I would say second or third generation Muslim immigrants, in some cases, British citizens, have become radicalized. I think what the power of the internet and the power of certain types of kind of hate preachers has been a real serious concern, and it goes beyond just the British Pakistani community. I know there are elements that are being dealt with. I think it's perhaps not seen as quite kind of clearly and coherent as you spelled out, but it is a big concern for the security services in Britain. Not my area of specialty, but I definitely know that is a topic that they spend a lot of time. And then increasingly you're seeing sort of, we had the, last year, the incidents in Leicester and sort of violence as well. So, I think for a while there was a view that, this is a sort of success story. It's one where there certainly needs to be an eye kept on it, I think.
Yeah, because we've suffered, and we know this firsthand, and when we see it happen in other parts of the world, we're often surprised why would they permit it. Is being politically correct more important than doing the right thing? But of course, that's an aside from the main story, and I want to come back to the main story for a bit longer. Your reading of Pakistan's army chief Asim Munir and the kind of speeches that he made, the two-nation theory, saying Hindus and Muslims are different, we are very different, and this was something like Jinnah would talk that led to partition. Do you see him as one of my guests said, Ambassador Ajay Visaria, that he's more, Asim Munir is like a cross between Jinnah and Zia?
I have to say, even, when the sort of, his name was touted and floated. And before that speech, there were other sort of writings and indications. I mean, it just seems to be such a sort of retrograde and regressive view. The fact of the matter is, Pakistan needs to have an understanding and a working relationship with India. Pakistan cannot afford, quite frankly, to be locked into a continued cycle of hostilities. This is a country that's on its 24th or 25th IMF bailout, endemic problems with the economy, with employment, with energy. Pakistan needs a break. And so an army chief who has such a divisive worldview, does not augur well for getting Pakistan into the political situation it needs vis-a-vis India, right? Even if we don't imagine anytime soon that there will be a flourishing of cross-border trade and intercourse and interstate reactions, it just needs to be able to focus on itself and not focus on anything else. And I just don't see that happening under this kind of leadership.
On the contrary, there are apprehensions that, as you very rightly pointed out, that there's an apprehension there could be another terror attack on India or an Indian interest, maybe through Bangladesh, maybe through Nepal. The apprehension is that after his meeting, the American president, and this is his second meeting at the White House, the security deal with Saudi Arabia and the assistance that he's getting from China, with three godfathers, he'll be emboldened to carry out terror attacks. What's your reading?
Well, I mean, a number of those developments are incredibly surprising. I mean, particularly on the U.S.-Pakistan front. I mean, at the end of the Biden administration, Pakistan was not even on the radar of any significant policymaker in the U.S. In fact, no one above the Assistant Secretary of State at the time, Donald Lu, thought about Pakistan on a daily basis. And the way in which it has elevated to the top of the Trump team's agenda is, I think, really shocking and caught a number of analysts off guard. Now, there's a variety of reasons there. There, of course, has been some very savvy political lobbying. I think there's a crypto interest as well within the White House. But just to link the two pieces together, I mean, one of the things I find really interesting about this Saudi Pakistan deal is, I have no firsthand information on this. This is just my kind of speculation and observation. But the U.S. has been trying to exit the Middle East for a long time, right? We can go back all the way to the Obama administration's pivot to Asia, and the fact that no matter how many times and how many administrations attempted to focus their attention there on the Indo-Pacific, they kept getting pulled back to the Middle East. It's people often forget this, but in the first decade after independence, and when the United States first started getting involved in Pakistan, after trying to reach out, the Truman administration did approach India first, and that didn't work out. the relationship with Pakistan was in the context of the security of the Gulf and the broader Middle East, right? Pakistan was seen as part of the broader Muslim world. South Asia wasn't necessarily a concept then. And the U.S. wanted Pakistan to help provide security in the Gulf against a possible Russian invasion. And that is why the partnerships with Turkey, the partnerships with Iran, the partnerships with Pakistan, you can see that whole line there. And in some respects, I think the Trump administration has returned to that kind of model. And I do know at sort of mid-levels of the Department of Defense, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South Asia, Andy Byers, is really into this idea of the Nixon Doctrine, right? After Vietnam, the U.S. said, hey, we're not going to primarily police parts of the world, but we're going to train and equip other countries to do it. So the Shah of Iran, we're going to give him arms and training and equipment so he can kind of keep stability in this area. I could actually see the Trump administration having encouraged this kind of partnership. And perhaps one of the things that Munir sold Trump on is that Pakistan can be an asset with Saudi to try to keep stability in the Gulf so the Americans don't have to.
And do you think that's even feasible in case, not that I have any information that any country would want to target Saudi Arabia, but should there be escalation of tension between Saudi Arabia and Israel, like Qatar, but Saudi doesn't, keep the Hamas, so there is no reason.
I think Saudi actually, before the current situation in Gaza, they were inching towards, Abraham Accord, some kind of normalization. Yeah.
And then the IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So they're looking at economic prosperity. Not that Pakistan would assist Saudi Arabia against Israel or Saudi Arabia assisting Pakistan against India. It does not look feasible. But
look, history tells us that every time Pakistan sells itself as an asset in this kind of way and gets itself military assistance of any kind, it's put towards India. It's not put towards this mission to help defend the Gulf. It's not put towards this mission to stave off communism. And so if something comes of this, Saudi military aid, U.S. military aid, what have you, it will be used to modernize and focus towards India.
So the effort is to keep India down.
No. I'm just saying that Pakistan is very good at selling itself as a partner to the Americans, and particularly this administration, which, unlike Trump 1, which did have a number of credible South Asia specialists, the White House does not have people who have real deep subject matter expertise here. And so, Munir and his team can probably spin a good story with the aid of lobbying and, Trump, who doesn't know very much about the region. I could easily see them being sold on this idea.
What do you think is the story behind Trump Americans trying to get back the Bagram airbase in Afghanistan? What's the game what's at play there?
I have no idea. I really have no idea with that one. And again, trying to make sense of everything the Trump administration does would be a full-time job for many individuals. So I can't begin to speculate on this one.
Because first, you're the one who wants to leave.
Absolutely.
And you leave in such horrible circumstances. You leave such chaos behind, hand it over to Taliban, and then you say, I want it back. Unless Pakistan has told them that the dream that we will help you in Afghanistan. And if that is to counter Iran, isn't Pakistan buying more trouble for itself? The Shia should need trouble. Yemen's already saying we've got 25,000 graves dug up for Pakistani soldiers in Saudi Arabia.
Again, Pakistan needs stability. It needs a working relationship with all of its neighbors, and it needs to focus on itself and its economy, its burgeoning young population who need jobs, who need education. It doesn't need any more trouble anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and it seems to be buying it or getting it for free everywhere.
Exactly.
Trouble on every border: Afghanistan, Iran, India. And do you see that Pakistan suffering because of this, the number of soldiers they're losing in Baluchistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, what's happening, and yet no sign of stability. Will, in your appreciation, Asim Munir use this opportunity to foment more trouble with India, given the fact that he could not succeed, though he succeeded in elevating himself to Field Marshal, to elevate himself as president of Pakistan? Would he try and mess around once again? I think the fact that Sindoor ended with this
Pakistani counter narrative of success means that they have a plausible reason to not push at the moment. And again, because of the economy and because of their own domestic troubles, I would think that any serious strategic leader would take advantage of that opportunity. They could claim that they, saved face and double down domestically and try and get their own house in order. It would be certainly a reckless and a very unstrategic approach to try to go another round with India at the moment, but. What is the quality of the man, right? Is he a deep military thinker, or is he a sort of a temperamental fellow who thinks tactically but not at the highest levels? I don't know.
What's your reading of Operation Sindoor in terms of who had the edge, who had the upper hand?
I think India clearly came out with the upper hand. It had a clear goal in terms of targeting the facilities it targeted on the first night. It achieved that. Now, whether or not those were occupied and active at the moment, how much degradation took place in terms of those organizations, had many people already gone to ground, had they anticipated, that will only come out over time. But certainly the ability and intent to act. And then when the conflict did not end, on those terms on that first night, in the subsequent rounds, again, the ability and willingness to penetrate Pakistani air defenses, to strike a range of air bases, to suppress radars and air defense systems, and to pretty credibly defend their own territory and airspace, really showed a high level of ability and political will to act, and then, brought to a close, before things, potentially escalated too far. So I really think demonstrating that ability, we can't say that the IAF had achieved full air dominance over Pakistani territory. That'd be going too far, but they were carrying out strikes at will, which is a pretty significant sign. So yes, were platforms lost? We don't know exactly how many. We at some point in time will, but not to denigrate the risks undertaken, but, military, you suffer casualties in war. You undertake military operations. You expect that damage will be inflicted. And so that's part of the price and part of the process. It's also why we need to use military force responsibly, because there are real lives at risk. But to say that, it was a failure because a plane or two or three were shot down is, in my calculation, wrong.
I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. Walter Ladwig III for joining me here on the Chakravyuh Podcast, sir.
Thank you very much.
So the message very clear. On the 10th of May, when Pakistan sought a ceasefire, those were 11 Pakistani air bases down, multiple aircraft, and now that's come out in public domain. An advanced early warning airborne platform 324 kilometers away was downed, and Pakistani air bases across the country. We leave it to you to decide who had the upper hand. I'm very clear about it. India had Pakistan on the mat. For joining me here on the Chakravyuh Podcast, many thanks.